a cold afternoon in the winter time of 2016, and I'm laying on my bed watching YouTube when all of a sudden I start to feel extremely bored. So, being the 9-year-old boy that I am, I decide I'm going to go and talk to my eldest brother, Scott. I slowly make my way down the dark hallway with the sound of rain on the tin roof getting louder and louder with every step I take. I knock on my brother's door, no response. I knock again, no response. It's at this point that I decide I'm going to go in to see if he's actually in there. Sure enough, I open the door and he's nowhere to be seen. So I decide to check the kitchen, the lounge room, the bathroom. I can't find him anywhere, which was fucking strange considering we'd both caught the bus home 30 minutes earlier together. But then I realized, oh, maybe he could be outside, maybe he's out the back. So I enter the laundry and I exit out the door. And it's in this exact moment that I see my eldest brother, who is 13 years old at the time, sitting on the back veranda, inhaling smoke out of something which I have never seen before. But before I tell you what happens next, let me paint a picture for you. Despite growing up with two loving parents, I was exposed to a lot of things that I definitely shouldn't have been at an extremely young age. A couple months before this story takes place, I had discovered porn and had started watching it every single day for 15 minutes after school. The people I would hang out with at school, I'll just say, weren't as fortunate as me, and they lived up in very different circumstances, and that rubbed off on me, as well as my older brother, who wasn't hanging out with people who weren't necessarily as fortunate as us. On top of this, I would often pirate movies behind my parents' back without them knowing, and I was heavily influenced by all of these factors. At school, I was sort of known as a bit of a troublemaker to the teachers, getting detention at least once every single week. I would sell lollies at school. I got caught for it a couple of times, but growing up, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I always looked up to my dad because I saw what he had done for our family. He took us from living in a 2-bedroom shed as a 5-person family to living in a really nice house that we all are able to have our own bedroom in. And that really inspired me as a kid. I always said that I wanted to be like my dad. So that pretty much brings you up to speed with everything you need to know going forward in this story. So I'm out on the back veranda and I start to approach my brother. I say, "Scott, what are you doing?" He looks up, and it's in this moment that you think he would hide what he's doing, or he would deny it, and he would lie about what he's doing. But given that my brothers and I had all grown up pretty close with each other, he just assumed that I wouldn't snitch. And he tells me what he's doing. He says, "Oh, I'm smoking weed." He proceeds to say, "Don't tell mum and dad this and that, don't snitch on me." Of course, I wasn't going to in the first place. But that's when I say to him, "Do you think I could have some?" And he says to me he doesn't have enough. Even if I had some, I'd probably be sick, so he can't give me any today. Right, so we go back inside. But I get to school the next day, which is a Friday. I'm sitting in class talking to my best mate, Jimmy, at the time. And I start telling him about what had happened the previous afternoon. I caught my brother smoking weed, it's so cool. And then I start making up a lie that later this night I'm going to smoke weed with my older brother. But Jimmy says to me, "Oh, that's so cool, I wish I could do that." Yo, brother, if you're enjoying this story, please hit the sub button. You have no idea how much it helps me out. I'll let you get back to the video. So I go home this day, start talking to my eldest brother, Scott, and I decide that I'm going to ask him the same question I had asked him yesterday. "Do you think I can smoke some weed?" Now, here's exactly what he says to me. He says, "No, but I have something you can have." And he proceeds to tell me to follow him. So we leave his room and I follow him up the hallway to the kitchen. Now at this point, mum and dad aren't home. I believe mum was in a meeting, dad was still at work. He goes into the pantry, grabs a Ziploc bag, and he starts pouring a bit of kitchen herbs into the bag. Now, I'll just start by saying exactly what you read in the title does happen. I'm getting to it. He tells me to come out on the back veranda with him. We go out there and he instructs me on what to do. He packs up a and lights it up. No more than 10 seconds later, I am sitting there coughing my guts up, just wishing I hadn't done it. And it's after this that Scott says to me we should go inside because we don't want mum and dad to get home and catch us doing this, right? So we go inside. Later that night, we watch a movie with mum and dad. I get to school the following Monday and I'm telling my close mate, Jimmy, about what had happened on Friday night, right? I'd actually done what I told him I was gonna do, sort of. And he says to me, "Can I bring some to school for him to take home?" Now, at the time, obviously I wanted to fit in. I really wanted to be liked amongst my friends at school. So I say to him, I'm gonna bring him some. Right, so I'll go home this afternoon. I'll pour some kitchen herbs into a Ziploc bag, just like I'd seen my brother do. And I bring it to school the following Tuesday. Give it to him. And from what I remember, he does end up going home that afternoon, putting it in like an A4 sheet of paper and, sticking it up. But it gets to Friday of the same week. I've just got home from school, caught the bus home. I'm laying on my bed watching YouTube once again. And it's at this point that my brother Scott walks into my room and tells me to come out the back and with him. Only this time, he wasn't talking about kitchen herbs. I was about to for the very first time at 9 years old. Now, I'll preface this by saying I believe he had already been out hooking into it himself before he had come into my room. So it goes without saying, he was super already. And I say to him like, yes, I want to. Now, we didn't have much time because my parents had just left to go and get our takeaway pizza for dinner, and they would be back in around 20 minutes. So he tells me to hurry up, we're gonna go out the back and do this together. I follow him all the way out the back. With every step I take, my heart is just beating faster and faster. Not because I'm nervous, because I'm excited. This was super novelty to me at the time. We get all the way out the back of our property to where the shipping containers are. We sort of position ourselves in between two containers so we're kind of hidden away from everything. He pulls out the ball, packs it up, and he puts it up to my mouth. I breathe deep. And this time I don't cough at all. It takes me maybe 10 seconds to completely clear it. And I can't tell you exactly how I felt in this moment. This memory is nearly 10 years old at this point. But I just remember thinking to myself, I feel extremely different, okay? I don't feel like my normal self. But anyhow, Scott proceeds to have a couple himself. Now, once again, I just want to say I was 9, he was 13. We were both far too young to know any better. But little did I know it at the time, this decision would be the very first stepping stone into a chain of decisions which would lead me to be facing 3 years behind bars just 6 years later, but I'm going to get to that in a sec. So Scott proceeds to have another 2 and he decides that we better go inside before mum and dad get back. We start walking back towards the front of the property, to get in the house. And literally as soon as we're about to go back in through the laundry door, we see mum and dad are already home, getting out of the car with the pizzas in hand. They're about 3 or 4 meters away from us. Now, keeping in mind, Scott has everything in his hand, right? The everything he's holding. Now, thank God he was thinking fast this day despite being as fuck. He quickly leaps into action. He gets the and he throws it into the dog kennel which is nearby. And he follows this by just casually saying to mum and dad, "Oh, hey mum and dad." Now, although this is a funny part of the story, it's a good memory to look back on. I can only imagine how this cunt was feeling on this day. 13 years old after 4 or 5 dogs, bro. I would have been absolutely shitting it in this situation, but nonetheless, we don't get caught. It was a very, very close one. We go inside, have dinner, and I remember just laying on my bed this night thinking, I feel so fucking weird. Like, it's just different. I can't describe the feeling being so young. I just feel very, very different. Fast forward to June of 2020. By this point, I'm 12 years old, about to turn 13. And I've been knocking around with this kid who we will call Rufus for the sake of this story for the past few months. Now, Rufus had also gotten into smoking super young. I believe he was about 9 or 10 when he first started as well. So for whatever reason, on this particular afternoon, we decided we were going to go knocking on kids' doors until someone finally sold us some. Okay, the bell rings to go home from school, and Rufus and I had already planned to get picked up by my mum at 4 p.m. that afternoon. So we had about half an hour of knocking on doors. We start walking up the street to all of the commission flats, and we come across these 2 girls. We start talking to them, we tell them what we're looking for, and they say, yep, follow us. So we do. We follow them for around 10 minutes until we finally get to the supposed house of the person we are getting this from. They knock on the door, and we are greeted by a man who would have been no less than 40 years old at the time. We tell him the amount of money we got, what we want, and he goes back inside, shuts the door. Around 5 minutes goes by, he comes back out with a bit of wood wrapped up in a piece of toilet paper, I believe. We say thank you to this bloke, walk up to the mall, get picked up by my mum. And later that night we have just about the whole lot of what we bought. And bro, this was the decision which really kicked off a roller coaster of fucked up events in high school. Fast forward to early 2021. By this point, I'm meshing up just about every single weekend with my mates. Either my best mate Crocker would come to my house or I would go to his, and we just all of the time. I wasn't a super regular user, as in I wasn't doing it every day. But anyhow, it's around this time that I get my first ever girlfriend. She was a super innocent, sweet, kind-hearted girl who had just moved from a private school. But around a month into dating her, she had started to see some of the things that I was doing, and she decided that she wanted to start dabbling in it as well. She obviously saw it was easy enough to get, you know, I could just get it for her, so she decides she wants to experiment, you know. We go downtown one weekend and we go into this like secluded little part that was blocked off from the general public, and she smokes with me for the very first time. Now, I didn't think anything of this at the time, but over the next couple of months, she starts getting into prescription pills, you know, a lot harder stuff than what I was into at the time. Now, of course, I didn't know about this. She hadn't told me, but one night at her friend's house, something had happened. You know, there was a big drama where she felt super sick, and she ended up telling me that she'd been taking prescription pills. And I nearly broke up with her at this point, bro, I did, because her innocence was just slowly but surely fading. But I thought, no, I can't hold this against her. You know, we live and we learn. I've made the same sorts of mistakes before. But no more than a month after this experience, I'm at the gym training one day when I receive a message from one of her friends, pretty much telling me that she's overdosed, okay? Now, obviously this is shocking to me at the time because I didn't even know what the fuck she had done, bro. I just knew she was hanging out with her friends the night before. But it was my understanding that we were past this stage, you know, we were super honest with each other, because that's genuinely how I felt being in this relationship with her. You know, I thought there was a deep sense of trust by this point. But she'd obviously just gone and broken that. And that was the least of my worries at this time. So I go into the gym bathroom, I call up her friend, and I'm fuming. Okay, I'll say to her, like, what did she take? What has she done? Is she okay? And she pretty much just explains me exactly what happened, you know, what they did the night before and the consequences that followed. Apparently she was sitting on the shower floor. She had super blurred vision. She couldn't see straight, felt super sick. And this was her over, okay? What she had done the night before, she is fucking lucky she did not die from. And I decide that I think it's the best decision to break up with her, but I don't. Okay, I sort of rationalize with myself once again, oh, it's a mistake, we all make mistakes, rah, rah, rah. Because I loved her at the time and I didn't want to cut her off completely. I just wanted to accept it as a mistake and move on. But it gets to August of 2022. By this point, we've been dating for around a year and a half, and we have been fighting so fucking much over the past couple of months. She just wasn't the same girl that she was when I met her. You know, she used to be sweet, innocent, trustworthy, and that sense of trust was broken. There was no communication anymore. The love that we once felt for each other became toxic, not just on her end, but on mine. We'd yell at each other, we'd fight, we'd break up, we'd get back together. And because of this, I decided it was in both of our best interests to just part ways. You know, that's as simple as I can put it. I decided I'm gonna break up with her. Now, of course, this wasn't the decision I wanted to make at the time, but it was the decision I knew I needed to make, not just for her, but for myself. I felt trapped in this relationship. But of course, I now have loads of free time on my hands. So what does a 15-year-old boy with loads of free time do? He starts smoking weed every single day. Now, at first it was light, you know, I might have 3 or 4 throughout the day consistently, but over time it started to ramp up. It took control of my life day by day. By the time I got to December, I was smoking about a half a week, so 3 grams every single day. And it had completely taken control over my life to the point where I didn't even want to go to school. I was taking half days, I was wagging just about every class. My attendance for the entire year was 42%. Purely just because in the last 2 terms where I wasn't with my girlfriend, I was wagging so many classes, I wasn't showing up to school, and this led to a complete dependency on it. But it gets to around the end of December, and I realize that it has taken control of my life. So I decide I'm gonna quit for good. But this doesn't stop me from moving on to something much, much harder. I'll start taking out 3 or 4 times a week, every week with my best mate Crocker. Given that it's the school holidays and I'm already selling this shit, I figure why not do it? You know, it's a bit of fun. I keep this up for around a month and a half. Every single time I would do it, I would tell myself it needs to be the last time. It's time to lock in. This isn't good for you. But I would keep doing it again and again until, of course, it gets to the night that changed everything. My mates and I got super f***ed up, and we beat a man half to death for assaulting my mate's mum. To sum it up, because most of you will already know what happened, my house was raided on my mum's birthday. I was arrested shortly after, and myself and the 2 other mates involved were facing 3 different charges with up to 3 years in jail. Now, I'm pretty sure it goes without saying, but this wouldn't have happened if we weren't on hard drugs at the time. You know, we would have been thinking more critically, more rationally, and we wouldn't have beat the fuck out of this guy. And that's the thing, bro, there's only one place that this path leads, okay? Nothing good comes from taking drugs. It usually just leads to crime, jail time, repeat. You just keep making bad decisions until you end up there. And I know this is sort of an extreme example of someone who's gotten into all of this stuff. Some teenagers are fine to just do it and have a bit of fun. Of course, I always advise against it, but it's not just me who's had this experience. I know that fella, I believe his name's Alex Milovanov online. He started at 9 years old, and by 16 years old, he was addicted to meth. My best mate Crocker had the exact same situation happen to him that happened to me. We were close side by side throughout this entire thing. And I mean, bro, despite the fact that we both came out the other side, so did Alex, most people don't. People who start drugs never stop. It consumes them day by day, week by week, year by year, until it has control over their life. All they can think about is where their next hit is coming from. It's so sad, bro, but it's the truth. And the thing is, whilst you are doing it, you can't see how fried your mind actually is. It's too fried to even rationalize what you're doing. You consider it to be normal. Okay, I see plenty of people in my comment sections trying to fight why we're good, how it's good for you. You know, they should continue doing it because of all these benefits. No. It's not good for you. Okay, bro, so I want this video to serve as your sign to stay away from all this stuff. And I want to wrap this up on a more positive note. I don't hold any resentment towards my brother, okay? Scott has helped me in many ways throughout life. Of course, today we're both reasonably successful businessmen. We've come out the other side of it. But like I said, we were both too fucking young and dumb to know better. We were just both impressionable kids. That's simply what we were. Despite him being older, we were kids, bro. Okay? All right, bro, so please just stay away from drugs, stay away from alcohol, and hit the sub button to stay on the right side of YouTube. I hope this video helped. Stay grinding, my G.